All right, Jason, we're ready. Handing going over to you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April General Club meeting. Today's club activity, will be a presentation about Parks on the Air from Matt, N3NWV, from Parks on the Air. And of course, you can go to parksontheair.com for more information. Today, he'll be talking with us about POTA and what is it, how does it work, and why you might want to get involved. It's been now that a lot of the parks are opening back up and weather's getting beautiful, kind of like today, it'll be wonderful to be able to get back out there and enjoy our radios out in the nice fresh air and sunshine. So the slides that Matt will be presenting, I've got a copy of, so we'll be posting that along with this video presentation after the meeting. So if folks have to jump out early or you want to review the material later, you'll have easy access to that. I've got a little bio here from Matt. Matt handles training and media creation for the Parks on the Air program. In real life, he's an electrical engineer living in Western PA with his daughter, son, and a cavalcade of animals, thanks to his XYL, who's a veterinarian. So that's about it. Thanks, Matt, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you. You should have access to be able to share your screen and start your presentation. And we'll have enough time, after Matt's presentation to be able to ask questions. Do we take what we need to, and then we'll do the business side of the meeting after that. So certainly no rush there, but we'll kind of keep it moving along. Hey, Matt, off to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I forgot that I sent you that little bio. Fortunately, it's all true. So we love.
Oh, good. Don't make me a liar.
We love what we like to call mud season around here because the dogs. We start with 5 acres, and by the time the dry part of summer rolls around, I think we're down to 4. The other one has been tracked into the house, but such is life. Well, anyhow, as Jason said, my name is Matt, call sign N3NWV. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about me because POTA is the more interesting topic. But I've been doing this ham radio thing for a while. I was licensed back, early 90s sometime. Did what a lot of people do, especially when they get licensed when they're younger, and took kind of a hiatus from ham radio for a while I got married and got my wife through school and had kids and all that kind of fun stuff. Realistically, it was Parks on the Air that got me back to being active in ham radio. And we're going to talk a little bit about what is so special about POTA that it has these magical powers and can do things like that. So let's start with what it is and where it came from. Those of you who were active in HF back in 2016 probably remember the National Parks on the Air special event thing that the ARRL put together. It was actually one of the more successful things the ARRL has done in recent memory. Was a huge amount of fun. People loved going out to the national parks and lighting them up, and people seemed to enjoy chasing them around. But National Parks on the Air had 2 problems, and they're problems that are shared by events like Field Day or going on DXpeditions. And that's accessibility. You had to be able to get to a national park in order to participate in POTA. Well, not everybody lives near a national park. And even for the people that do, on January 1st, 2017, poof, it went away and was no more. So the people who started Parks on the Air tried to take what was good about these various things that we like to do in ham radio and fix the problems of accessibility and cost and time pressures. And the result is POTA. Which brings me to the very first reason you might want to get involved in POTA. It's just plain old fun. You can hear it in the activators' voices when you find one of them on the air and you hear them calling CQ or QRZ or running the pile up, whatever they happen to be doing at that point in time. They're just having a blast because it is fun, because a lot of the things that made some of those other programs annoying have been removed. POTA has enough structure to work reliably. There's somebody there, but it's free form enough that you can do it sort of however you want and make sure that it's enjoyable, because this is, after all, a hobby. It is supposed to be fun. Part of it being fun, at least for me, is that it's easy. As I get older, I'm getting lazier. There's just no two ways about it. And POTA does not have a complicated set of rules. We'll talk about the rules that there are. It doesn't have a whole bunch of requirements as to what your station can or can't be, or when you can do it. Quite frankly, POTA is so easy that usually when I give one of these talks, I run into somebody who's done it and they don't even know they did it. They talked to a hunter who was out in the park because they just heard somebody call in CQ. So they called him back and they worked POTA and they did it right, even without knowing they're doing it, because it really is that simple. We'll talk about stations a little bit later, but one of the very, very popular ways to activate a park is from a mobile rig. There are lots and lots of activators who don't pack things up in a backpack. They don't, they either have mobility issues or they're in Florida in August or whatever, and operating from the comfort of their car is a far better system for them. So we, by not having a whole bunch of structure, have made it so that everybody can find a way to do things the way they want to do them. So the conditions, this is going to depend a little bit on where you are most of the time. I live out in the country and up on a hill. It's almost like I knew I was going to do ham radio when I picked this place. But still, here at home, I run the preamp on 20 meters, maybe 25% of the time. The rest of the time, there's too much noise around. It doesn't do me any good. I get to the park every single time. I have yet to have more than about an S1 noise floor. Usually it's S0 when I get to the park. Even without the RF conditions being better, the scenery is certainly better than the beige wall that's behind my 7300. But the best part of it, and this is one of the things that I think POTA does well that Field Day claims to do, but it doesn't actually ever happen. And that is demonstrate ham radio to the public. Most of the time when I'm in a park, somebody will swing by and say hi. They're walking their dog, or the park ranger rolls down his window or whatever. And it's always a pleasant encounter. It usually starts with somebody asking me which aliens I'm trying to contact, and ends with them understanding that ham radio still exists. You'd be amazed how many people think it's gone the way of the dodo bird. Being out in public and showing people that ham radio is still there and still relevant and still fun and works is a really, really big benefit of the POTA program in general. And obviously, the more people out there doing it, the more of that benefit we get. And then the last thing I put in here is last on purpose, because I know this doesn't resonate with everyone. But there is a rich system of awards and achievements that you can unlock through participation in POTA. Now, I have to throw this in here at the same time. POTA is not a contest. Contests have start and end times, and most importantly, contests have a winner. Somebody comes out number one in the contest. No such thing in POTA. In POTA, every single person participating in the program can, over the course of time, earn or unlock every single one of the awards and or achievements. It's not a competition. It is not a contest. So you will hear POTA activations on 17 meters on the WARC bands. Perfectly okay. That's what they're there for. In fact, you hear a lot of POTA activations on the WARC bands when there are actual contests going on and clogging up the rest of the place. So I've been throwing these terms around. Let's make sure everybody knows what they are. There's really only two that are relevant to POTA. One is the activator, and this is the person who is in the park. The activators are the ones for whom there are a couple of rules, which we're going to get to. first and foremost, that they have to actually be in the park. The hunters are the folks who are not in the park. And hunting really doesn't have much in the way of rules. In fact, there aren't any POTA specific rules. The rules for being a hunter are essentially to stay legal, follow Part 97, and don't be a jerk, right? Don't tune up on top of the pileup. If the activator's calling QRZ when they get to the end of their QSO with any given person, wait for them to call QRZ before you start throwing your call out there. Real, just basic, follow the golden rule type stuff, and you're good for hunting. Hunters are not required to log anything. There's not a fixed exchange that must occur. Obviously, because you don't have to log anything, you don't have to submit any logs. It's all based off of the activators. So to be a hunter, all you really have to do is find an activator and call them. That's it. For the activators, they're going to have to have a Parks on the Air account. Now, by the end of this, I'm going to have suggested 4 times that everybody should have a Parks on the Air account so that you're able to go into the system and see the progress you've made towards the awards and the achievements and whatever else. But you don't have to hunt. You do to be an activator, because after you go to the park, and realistically, that's the hardest part of being an activator, is figuring out what the boundaries of the park are. Because sometimes there's a real great map on the state park website, for instance. The national parks, the boundaries are pretty well established. But there are some states where finding the information about exactly where does this park start and stop is tricky. So you got to be in the park, and the activators are the ones who are going to have to submit logs. There's a standard, we use the ADIF standard, including the standard SIG and SIGinfo and my SIGinfo fields that are part of that spec for logging for the activators. There's an entire PDF and video on the website about how to handle the logs if you're an activator. And it's not that bad. Once you get your logging software set up to do it the right way, to get the right information in there, it's a piece of cake. Okay, so speaking of the website, we've got a couple of them. Parksontheair.com is the main website for the organization. And that's where you'd go to create your account, and you can log in with Amazon or Facebook or Google, or create a dedicated login for POTA, whatever works for you. The other website that we maintain is POTA.us. That's supposed to be US as in all of us, because it's a global resource. The POTA.us site is where the map that shows all of the parks is located. And it's also the spotting page. It's where you can go to see, who's out there right now. So I know you're never supposed to do anything live in a presentation, because it always breaks, but we'll give it a go anyway. I have the Parks on the Air website up here. And as it turns out, this weekend is a special event within POTA, which is already a special event. So I guess that's weird. But anyway, this is the Spring Support Your Parks weekend. So you can actually earn an award for POTA by simply hunting one station. Just participate in POTA this weekend, and you'll qualify for the Support Your Parks award. But so anyway, let's go look at the spotting page right now. And okay, so fair warning, I have a beta version of the spotting page. It's just part of the joy of being on the POTA staff, is they turn you into a guinea pig for all the development work. But so if you go to POTA.us and look at the spots, it won't look exactly like this, but you get the idea. At the moment, with activators who have declared that they're done and gone QRT hidden, there are 43 activations going on live right now. They seem to be spread across 7 on CW, 7 on digital, and 32 on sideband. And 40, 30, 22 and other, which means somebody typed in their frequency wrong. They're out of, they're claiming to be out of band. I'm sure they're not. So it's a real good mix. Odds are, if you're sitting in front of your radio right now, you go to POTA.us, find one of these spots, you'll be able to hear some of these people, and you could work them. And the map is accessible via this little hamburger menu here. You go to the map and pull it up, and it centers. If you have location services turned on, it'll center on where you are. So I pulled it up and scrolled over to your neck of the woods a little earlier this morning, and you can, I don't know if you can make them out or not, but all these yellow dots indicate that there is a POTA eligible park somewhere in that vicinity. Now, again, you're going to have to go to whatever the managing entity is for that park to get the real map that says, okay, here's where the boundaries of it are. And once in a while, you'll find something like the National Historic Trails and the National Scenic Trails are in the park system. Well, there's only one dot somewhere for the entirety of the Appalachian Trail. So you can't always go by the dots, but they do give you an indication that there's something there. Okay, so that's those are the websites that are maintained by Parks on the Air. There are also 2 social communities active for POTA. One is over on Slack, if you're familiar with that. The Slack channel is, I would say, it's more the business of POTA. This is where the developers and the admins hang out and, you know, discuss the back-end database and stuff like that. But there are a lot of the just rank and file membership that go there. In fact, somebody started a swap meet channel. So the beauty of having the Slack channel and things like the swap meet there is that it keeps the other social group, which is the Facebook page. It's a little hard to describe. The POTA Facebook group is the one and only Facebook group that I belong to that's not annoying. The POTA Facebook group, it started with a bunch of hams, and then it's the subset of hams that do Parks on the Air. So it's a real nice bunch of people. And the POTA Facebook group, believe it or not, is actually just about Parks on the Air. And if you ask a question, nobody's going to tell you it's a dumb question. Nobody's going to tell you to use the search box. They just answer the question and try to be helpful. The closest we ever come to a snide remark in the Facebook group is if you ask a question about logging using an electronic device, somebody is going to say that they use paper, which doesn't help you. But other than that, it's a great group. It's really the exception that proves the rule when it comes to Facebook. I also might point out this picture is out of date. I looked this morning, and we're closing in on 11,000 people registered for POTA. And there are almost 9,000 members in the Facebook group. So I actually think that one of the things that is making POTA work is that it's starting to feel like an actual community. It's more than just talking to people, a short, sort of irrelevant QSO on the air. You get to know these folks, and they become almost like an extended family. Okay, so having said that, and actually I unfortunately can't really see the chat. PowerPoint is covering it up. If there's a question, somebody just interrupt me. And but
yeah,
I'm going to take.
I'm keeping an eye on it for you. I've just been posting the website information. So
okay, gotcha. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to just sort of walk you through day in the life of an activator. These are the steps that you would go through if you were going to go out and activate a park. So step 1 typically is to figure out what park you're going to go to. And the map is by far the best way to do that. So here's a screenshot of the map showing plus or minus my area. That blue dot is close to right. And the parks that are within the scale is a little hard to judge here, but the Great Lakes up here, Heere is about an hour and a half. So a circle that big is an hour and a half's drive. Anyway, I'm going to pick a park, and then what I'm going to do most likely is go to the Parks on the Air website and schedule my activation. Now, this technically is an optional step, but when we get to talking about how you get spotted later, you're going to see that there are some good reasons to do this. And it's in general, if you're planning your activation far enough in advance that scheduling is relevant, and there definitely are lots of activations that happen because somebody was driving and saw a park and decided to turn in. So obviously those don't get scheduled. But having scheduled activations is very helpful to the hunters who don't live in their shack. They have to cut the grass and they have to go to the grocery store and they have to call their mom and they can play some radio and they can move any of those things around. And so it helps them to know when the folks are going to be out in the parks. Then you're going to pack up and you're going to go to the park. And I need to change this clip art because when I go to the park, it's usually via motorcycle. So that's wrong. And then you do the fun part. You start to play with your toys. When you get to the park, you're going to set up your station. Now, what is your station going to look like? We're going to talk about that more later, but in case anybody has to drop off, I'll tell you, here's the two things we care about when it comes to your station. It's footprint, and you're probably familiar with the hikers and campers creed, the leave no trace. Both of those things are very, very, very important to POTA as an organization and to our ability to continue to be welcome in the parks. If you're going to use a vertical with radials, make sure you're in a spot where your radials aren't going to be where somebody else wants to walk. Some parks are perfectly fine with throw wire up in a tree. Here in Western PA, that's pretty much my go-to antenna deployment mechanism. Try it on the National Mall down in DC. Throw a wire up in one of the cherry trees and see how far you get. I mean, time and place. You gotta understand your footprint and make sure it's appropriate for where you are. But regardless, you're going to set up, and then you're going to get yourself on the spotting page. Hopefully, this really is the key to a successful activation. You want to get on that spotting page. So if you have cell service from the park, you just fire up your phone and you go to the website and you spot yourself. Not a contest. Self-spotting is A-OK. Encouraged, in fact. If you don't have internet access from the park, now you're going to have to figure out, how am I going to get on the spotting page? So what a lot of people will do is they start spinning the VFO looking for another park activator. And they'll call that park activator, have what we call a park-to-park QSO, which is good for the log anyway. But then they'll either ask that activator to spot them, which most activators are happy to do, or in the rare occurrence that you run into another activator who didn't have cell service and can't spot you, typically what'll happen is one of the hunters who was already listening to the other activator will hear that you need a spot and will offer to do it for you. So that's
Hey, Matt, a quick question from Wade in the group. Are all parks eligible for activation? If a park is not registered, how can you get it registered?
Okay, if a park is, in order to be a POTA park, it has to be a nationally or state or province, depending on where you are, managed park. No city parks, no county parks. Most historical sites, it depends what the site is, but we just simply don't have the manpower to maintain the database of parks down to that level. So it's going to have to be a national park, a state park, a national wildlife refuge, or part of the National Historic or Scenic Trail System. So if it's not one of those 5 things, it's not going to be a POTA park.
So let's say it is one of those 5. Are they already?
It is one of those 5 things, and somehow it's not in the system. Then what you need to do is drop an email to help@parksontheair.com, and they will route that to whoever the mapping coordinator is for that particular piece of geography, and have them look into it.
Great, thanks, Matt.
Sure. So back on the spotting page, if you're working sideband, this social, old school social networking is the best way to get spotted if you don't have cell service. If you're running CW or digital, this is why you want to have your activation scheduled, because if your activation is on the schedule and you start calling CQ POTA with CW or digital, digital with FT4 or 8, you will get picked up by the beacon network. And we're integrated with the beacon network such that you'll be automatically spotted, assuming you were scheduled. That's the key. You have to be on the schedule for the beacon network to result in a spot. But this is so handy. Like I had to learn CW back in the day to get licensed, and then I forgot all about it. In the past 6 to 8 months, I've really been working at getting back into CW, because CW and POTA is just glorious. They're like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. Anyway, so by hook or crook, you're going to get on the spotting page, and then if you build it, they will come. Be prepared to be on what I like to call the right side of the pileup for a change. If your only experience with a pileup has been yelling at one, trying to get through it, it's going to be exhilarating the first couple of times you call CQ POTA. Even out on the folks out on the West Coast complain that it's just, it isn't for them what it is for those of us here east of the Mississippi. But with the bands picking up, 20 meters has been pretty reliable for the folks out there on the West Coast. So don't be surprised if you call CQ or QRZ and out of what you get back, you have to key up and people will hear you laughing and you say, well, okay, I got an N. I got an N out of that. Everybody with an N, try again. That's okay. Again, not a contest. We got all kind of time. When you're done, you're going to take that log, you're going to export it in ADI format, and you're going to send it to parksontheair.com. It's the email address is kilo, whatever the number of your call sign is. So my logs go to kilo3@parksontheair.com. Most of you, I suppose, are 7, so your logs would go to kilo7@parksontheair.com. And the beauty of this is that that's the end of what you have to do from a stats and tracking standpoint. Any awards or achievements or whatever that you've met the criteria for, they just happen magically on the back end. You don't have to apply for these things. You don't have to ask. You don't have to go on the website and push 19 buttons. If you uploaded your logs and you work 100 parks, then you get the 100 Park Award or whatever it is. So it's about as simple as we could have made it, I think. Speaking of QSOs, you say, well, what counts as a QSO for Parks on the Air? Since it's not a contest, it is slightly different than what you might be used to. You change any one of these 5 things, and you have a unique QSO. So we track activations by date and park. So on any given day, you could go to multiple parks, or like if you go camping somewhere and you're there for a week, you have a new activation every day. Obviously, call sign, if you talk to somebody else, that's a new QSO. Abandoned mode, you're kind of used to. For instance, if I were to work somebody on sideband CW and a various digital mode, everybody sort of understands that counts as 3 QSOs, even if everything else in that list is the same. Parks on the Air is a little more generous than that. If you work somebody on AM, FM, and sideband, that's going to be 3 QSOs so far as Parks on the Air is concerned. Likewise, if you manage to work the same person on the same band, maybe it's even the same frequency from the same park, no problem, but you worked them 4 different digital modes, that's 4 different QSOs so far as Parks on the Air is concerned. Because I'll read all the way back to the beginning, this is a hobby. This is supposed to be fun. The goal of the rules of POTA is to just get out of the way. If you want to try something, you should be able to try it, and you shouldn't have to sit there and go, oh, well, I would have loved to have fired up the slow scan TV software, but I already talked to everybody on FT8. No, go ahead, try it out. We're here to have fun. So we'll count it all. What the heck? Sun will come up tomorrow either way. I've been talking a lot about activators, and obviously that's because really there's just more to activating. The hunting is so simple, you don't really have to talk about it much. But I don't want to give you the idea that somehow hunters are second-class citizens in the organization. They most certainly are not. Of the 11,000 people that we have signed up for POTA, 10% tops are activators. Certainly with any regularity, it's way under 10%. Most of the people are hunters, and that's great because there's no point in going out to the park and calling CQ if there's nobody to talk to. So, you go out to do an activation, you want the pile up, you want the log with 250 QSOs in it, and there's got to be hunters to make that happen. So I would encourage all of you to at least try your hand at looking at the spotting page, spin your VFO to that frequency. If you can hear the activator, just drop your call sign on them. That's all you have to do. They'll probably want a signal report, and they'll want to know your ARRL section or something like that. You listen to 3 or 4 exchanges and you'll get the hang of it. None of it's required though. As long as they get your call sign, that's it. You're in the log. So you can do that even without creating an account at parksontheair.com. Again, I would encourage you to do that because the awards are interesting and they're pretty PDFs to download and look at if nothing else. So parksontheair.com for the help getting started. A fair warning, the videos, you're going to have to watch more of me. So maybe start with the PDF and consider the video a last resort or something. And then the POTA.us spotting page. And I guess I won't get fired if I tell you the beta version of that spotting page that has the cool filtering on it by band and mode and all that stuff is at POTA.app. So you can check that out too if you'd like. The ask from the devs though is if you're going to use the beta page, please join the Slack channel so you can give feedback on it. So there, I dotted the I's. And of course the Facebook group is just where everybody's hanging out. So I'm going to take a quick pause there and ask if there's any questions about Parks on the Air, the organization, or the rules, or really anything except equipment, because that's part B coming up here next.
Hey, Matt, is there any volunteer opportunities with the POTA organization, and how would you do that?
There are. That's an excellent question. There are some volunteer opportunities. They are still looking for help with map coordination. So if you're interested in ferreting out where the boundaries of parks are and who owns them and whatever, I think they're always looking for help with that. Anybody with any software development skills, get to the Slack channel and put your hand up. They can always use help with the dev stuff. And, as the Facebook group has grown and we've added, it seems like we're adding 50 and 100 people a day to that group. And the new folks always have questions. I mean, they probably would have a lot fewer questions if they would read the guides and then the fact like we asked them to, but they don't, not always. And so we can always use another knowledgeable person in the Facebook group to help answer questions pretty much perpetually.
Hey, Matt, there was another question here from the chat. Wade is asking, are there any special fields that need to be filled out for a POTA ADIF to be uploaded correctly?
Yes. All of the records, there's a standardized file name, which is given in the video that explains how the logging works. And there are 2 fields. There's the sig_info field, which is where you would put it. That's where the other person's park number, you would only fill that out if you were engaged in a park-to-park contact. Sig info is where the other guy's park number goes. The second field is my_sig_info, and that is where your park number goes.
Gotcha.
Other than that, they're standard, stuff you would expect, call sign, date, time, that kind of thing.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So that's POTA, the organization. And, it just doesn't, it doesn't have to be complicated. So we tried not to make it complicated. I would say the same thing really applies to the portable stations. The simpler you can make a portable station, the more likely you are to take it out someplace, and the more likely it is, frankly, to work when you get there, if it has fewer moving parts. I have a great example sitting downstairs in my garage. I sort of on a whim, I went into a camera shop to sell some old darkroom equipment, and I came out with a telescope. It's an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain Meade, the old LX series before they had computers in them. The tripod alone, I think, weighs 50 pounds. It's a great, great telescope. I get the best views of the inside of the closet where that telescope is on just all the time, because it's too big, it's too heavy, it's too complicated. I can't be bothered to get it out on the 3 not cloudy days a year we have in Western PA. So don't make my telescope mistake with your portable station. Just to run through some of the things you're going to need here. You're going to need some electric. You'd be amazed how often you can find 110 volt AC mains in a park, especially if you're going camping, right? And you're reserving a site with hookups, you're going to have power. Pavilions, check and make sure you're not supposed to have paid for the pavilion to use the electric, things like that. But it's more common than you might think. Generators, just no. If you're trying to run a whole RV or something like that and you don't have a choice, fine. Everybody understands that. But for the most part, generators are not holistically compatible with our please be a good ambassador to the public message. Batteries are where you find most of the activators, specifically the lithium iron phosphate batteries. The voltage profile is a whole lot better for running a radio that was designed around 13.8 volts. A battery that sits at 12.8 volts until it's dead works a whole lot better than a lead acid that starts at 12 and change and drops precipitously from there. The size and weight actually are just sort of the icing on the cake. We do have a subset of the community who likes to play with solar. Again, the people who are serious about solar are largely the people who are trying to run more than their ham station. The other folks mostly just wanted to play with it. So refer back to rule number 1. This is a hobby. It is supposed to be fun. If you want to play with solar, play with solar. It's a great idea. For my money, carrying a second battery is easier, but what do I know? Any radio is going to work, realistically. You might want to think twice if your plan is to try and run vacuum tubes off of a battery. That's going to be a challenge. But beyond that, as long as your radio functions, it's going to function for POTA. Yeah, the same nice to haves for POTA as anything else, particularly some sort of a built-in tuner. All the antennas that I use, plus or minus, are resonant antennas. But resonant antennas are a funny thing. You put them up in a different tree or in wetter ground, or, this wire is not at the same angle it was when you tuned it, and all of a sudden it's not exactly as resonant as it used to was. So having a little touch-up tuner so that your antenna that was 1.4 when you set it up in the driveway, if it turns out to be 2.1 when you get to the park, you can just hit the button and go. I've been doing a whole lot more QRP recently, combined with getting into CW. I love taking my KX2 out on the back of the motorcycle. It's a great little setup. But having said that, all else being equal, more radiated watts usually results in more contacts. The most important thing I can tell you about a radio is to remember what you intend to do and to make sure that you're okay with it. Funny little anecdote. I had a buddy in the local club call me up and say, hey, I just ordered my new radio from DX Engineering. Can I come along on your next park activation? Yeah, sure. No problem. He pulls up to the park. opens up the back door of the car and pulls out a brand spanking new, he hadn't even taken the, opened the box from DX Engineering, an ICOM 7610. He spent the next 2 hours going like this. What's that cloud doing? Is that a bird? You can't activate like this over your radio. Take a radio that you're okay with getting some bug spray on it. You'll have a whole lot better time than maybe the latest and greatest expensive thing. Antennas. Okay, if you want to spend a lot of time to arrive at no conclusion, bring up the subject of antennas in a room full of hams. I mean, the reality is everybody's got opinions about antennas. The only thing I'll tell you for sure is that every single antenna I have taken to the park and set up and plugged into a radio has worked better than every antenna that was talked about on Facebook. You gotta put some RF into them for them to work. That part I know. So don't let the idea that your antenna or your radio or whatever isn't perfect for what you're doing put you off of doing it. You're going to think about different things when you're thinking about an antenna that you're going to take to the park. Again, your footprint is critical. Your setup and teardown time. I mean, you don't really think about that at home. If you're putting up a permanent antenna, whether it takes you a half hour or 45 minutes, it's sort of irrelevant. You don't think about it. But an antenna you're going to put up and take down and put up and take down 4 or 5 times, maybe in the same day, you don't want that to take a half an hour. You just burned all of your activation time setting up and tearing down. Power handling, durability, what does your YL think of how it looks? These are secondary considerations for park antennas that come up a lot at home. There are classic antennas that you'll find, I would say, most of the people are using for POTA. They fall really into a couple of camps. The folks who are concerned first and foremost about their footprint are using these tripod-based antennas. The one on the left there is a thing called a Wolf River coil. In the middle is a buddy pole, and then that's, I think it's either an Alex loop or a chameleon loop. It's a mag loop there on the right. These things go up quick. They don't require any super tall masts. They don't require any stakes in the ground. They don't require any rope in the trees. They're very strict park staff friendly. What they are not is either cheap or efficient. You give up performance and you give up some greenbacks to acquire any of these things. But if this is the only antenna that you can use, then that makes it a great antenna. My personal sort of crop of these things, I'm a wire antenna guy. I like resonant, and I like to make things out of speaker wire when I can. So my two go-tos for the park, the one on the left is a linked dipole, which is cut for everything from 10 up to 40. And then the secondary winders that are there on the outside edge of it are extensions that give me 80 meters. And somebody asked me why I didn't cut my extensions for 60, and I have no idea. I just didn't. I probably should. And on the right is it's a thing called a DX Commander. It's just a quarter wave vertical. It happens to be a bunch of quarter wave verticals. Think fan dipole turned on its ear, so that it has multiple elements that are resonant for any bands you want. I also get great use out of end feds. So I have an end fed half wave, which in the picture, I cut this thing for 80 meters. Like anybody's got room for a half wave 80 meter antenna, much less trying to get it in a tree at a park. It has since been cut in half. It's now an end fed half wave for 40 meters, much more reasonable. And then the one in the middle is a quote unquote random wire. The terrible name for that antenna. That's the most carefully selected length of random wire ever. A little homebrew 9-to-1 on there. And then my deployment system. If you're going to use trees, which again is okay in some parks, check and make sure. But we do highly suggest that you go ahead and spend the $11 on Amazon. get a real arborist throwing bag and rope. It just makes the whole thing easier and work better. So the last piece of gear is another sort of semi-optional thing, and that's some sort of a computing device. I say semi-optional. It depends a little bit what you want to do. If you want to run digital modes, they're not really optional. FT8 is very difficult to do, with a handheld mic. So I suggest you have a computer if you want to run digital modes. But for logging, I personally am all in on electronic logging, with the caveat that I only think it makes sense if you've got a laptop that you can connect to the radio. If the electronic logger can log the band and the mode and the power and all of that stuff for you, I get better data to POTA. If I have to log on a piece of paper, that the paper itself is pretty reliable, but me writing down everything I was supposed to may not be. So you pays your money and you takes your choices when it comes to the logging. Obviously, computers, they work great when they work, but there's more moving parts to them. You got to power them. And particularly if you have an antenna that is not resonant, you're very, very likely to have RFI issues with a tablet or a Bluetooth keyboard or something like that. So definitely try this before you get to the park and make sure it's actually going to work when you put it all together. Okay, so speaking of trying stuff, here's just sort of the checklist. If you're anxious to get going, set up your station in your backyard, try it out, make a little checklist to make sure you've got all of the stuff in the car before you go, and start somewhere easy. The first time I gave this presentation, it was sub 10 degrees here, hovering actually down closer to 0. And we had just gotten 8 inches of snow. And I had to tell the people, I say, well, I might actually go out and do an activation in these conditions. I wouldn't go out and do my first activation in these conditions. Just make it easy on yourself when you get going, because it is relatively straightforward, but like anything else, the devil's sort of in the details. You will learn a lot on your first couple of activations. So just make sure you've got the time and you aren't putting any extra pressure on yourself so that you can deal with those lessons when they come up. Okay, that is the end of the slides, but I am happy to entertain any discussion, questions, feedback, thoughts, whatever you want.
All right. No new questions in the chat, so we'll kind of open it up to freeform. Anybody who's got a question, please speak up.
Oh, come
Think
on,
you
I'm
were
not
that
that
good,
good.
Matt?
Somebody's got to have a question.
Oh, yeah, I got one here. Everybody likes the fact that there's low noise level in the park, so you can usually get away with maybe a small radio, like your QX, what was that, a KX?
KX2, yeah.
Whatever that was, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
There you go, Joan.
There's one.
There you go.
Joan's holding it up. You'll be able to hear everybody, but not everybody's going to be able to hear you. And hence the reason for more power. I think that's what you were getting at on that too, is get an antenna that can do the power, or have something way up there, because more copper in the air will hit more people. Yeah.
And the experience is going to be a little different for you guys being out there on the West Coast, because you got oceans on one side and mountains right where all your 40 meter wants to land. So you're probably going to be looking at 20 meters and up, which, cross your fingers, those bands are coming alive here. There's actually been a lot of activity on 17 meters the last couple of weeks. So go figure. So yeah, you'll have to plan your antenna choices accordingly. When my very first contact, my trembling fist sending out CQ POTA on CW for the very first time, First guy I worked was in California in a mobile rig, no less. What he's doing CW Mobile, I have no idea, but good on him. And that was with a 5-watt signal. So it certainly can be done. I've done sideband activations with the 10-watt radio. Having a good antenna helps, but the other thing is, we're not using much I got 25 feet of coax, and I usually have half of it coiled up. So even if your antenna is just sort of mediocre, as long as it's not all ground losses, you don't really have to worry about the coax losses. You don't have any coax.
Got a question for you, Matt. Do you have videos of how you made your homemade antennas?
I do. Up on, I have a YouTube channel, which you can find by either my
Cool.
name or call sign, or just go to mattheere.com. It'll redirect you there. And there's a video for the linked dipole. There are a couple videos about the DX Commander. And I think it's the last thing I posted was a video of me out doing an activation with the linked dipole and in the snow.
Yeah, because the price of some antennas and things, it's kind of nice to save a few bucks and go down to Home Depot and, like you say, get some speaker wire and make your own.
There you go. There's
Cool.
the next 9-to-1 on in progress.
Cool, thanks.
It's real easy to build antennas. You have to learn a couple of things, yes, but it's not difficult.
I had a quick question for you. With them being parks, a lot of times it can be interesting to get the XYL or grandkids or children along with you. Do you have any kind of ideas or recommendations on how to make the POTA side of it not necessarily compete with the family side of it, but to try to get everybody kind of involved and make it more interesting as a family activity as a whole?
Well, if you hadn't said good ideas, then I would have an answer. I have lots of ideas that haven't panned out.
Bury a ham.
Yeah.
Happened
I'll tell
happened
you-
to do that exactly. So that part I'm already set on.
Yeah, anecdotally, I can tell you, my kids are 12 and 14. So getting them interested in anything that dad is doing is it's a lost cause. They're gone. They'll be back at some point. But I had a couple good years, and now, dad's an idiot, but they'll figure it out eventually. I have a couple of friends though who they're closer to being empty nesters, and they've talked their spouse into going with them under the guise of, well, you can walk the dog, or you can read a book, or we'll have a picnic. And the part of the beauty of POTA is that you're going to a park. So even if they're not interested in ham radio, there's something for other folks in the family to do. And what has happened to a lot of them is sort of by osmosis, their spouses have ended up getting more interested over time. It starts with, oh, hey, honey, would you help me set up this one piece of equipment before you take the dog? And then when they come back and you got the pile up going, and especially now that the bands are opening up and we're starting to get some DX mixed in there. My last activation, I had maybe 20% of the contacts were from Europe. And that just is more interesting to folks than talking to, Tennessee or Colorado or whatever, for whatever reason. So I don't know how you can make it interesting to them, but exposure can't hurt.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap and take a break and start?
Comments?
Oh, go ahead.
All right, let me unmute for real. Well, one of the advantages of using KX2 and making simple speaker wire dipoles for 40 meters, which are very lightweight, compact, and inexpensive, And I also have a big lithium ferrophosphate battery. It's one of my larger items, but it basically fit my whole go backs. My HF go station is
Yeah.
this is a kid's lunchbox.
She
I think
rides
it
a
was-
bicycle everywhere too.
Yeah,
This-
my whole station fits in a kid's lunchbox. Yeah.
So I'll hold it up next to my head for size comparison. And I know I have a big head, but you still get the idea. This is a 10 liter tail bag. It fits great on a 300cc motorcycle. It's got the KX2. It's got the lithium iron phosphate battery. It's got the end-fed half wave and the 49-to-1 and the coax and my little tree throwing rope and a bottle of water, first aid kit, electrical tape, and a Swiss Army knife. And you can hold it up with one finger.
Yeah.
I've made thousands of QSOs. Most of them voice. I am an absolute and total noob at this CW thing. I've done one CW activation.
I've done a lot of camping for a number of years with my radio, and I have at the time an FT897D battery, and I have a tote box that carries like anything from 16-foot whips to wires, and depending on the campsite, I either put out a tripod or throw something in a tree and talking to people low noise and at night in the campsite, and I always get the yes, I am talking to aliens. Thank you very much, and they'll be down here shortly to pick you up. So kind
Right.
of stuff.
Isn't
Yeah.
the S0 noise level wonderful
Yeah.
off the grid?
I mean, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. The other POTA setup is the linked dipole, or DX commander, right? So a full-sized resonant antenna fed by a Yaesu FT891. So 100-watt radio. Yeah, especially on sideband, night and day. Calling CQ on that rig versus CQ on the KX2. I'll come home with 20 or 30 sideband QSOs with the KX2 and the end fed. I'll come home with 200, 300, 400 QSOs with the 891 and the dipole or the DX commander. But, it doesn't mean that it's not fun with the KX2. It's different. So you find
it's
what
like
works for
fishing.
you, and then you do that.
QRP is more like having to be more wily and clever when you're fishing.
I like the fishing analogy. That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. Patient. That's the main thing.
yes.
You have to be patient.
Yeah, if you're not a patient person, QRP isn't for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and QRP is where you really, really start to notice the efficacy of digital modes. And I include CW as like the original digital mode. The KX2 is a great little radio. But CW is where it just really shines.
And the KX2, like all the Elecraft radios, have also like PSK and RIDI in their firmware. So you can send RIDI or PSK with your paddles.
Yeah.
Although I have a QRP Works Sidecar Plus and a QWERTY keyboard, a 2.4 gigahertz keyboard. So if you're doing that, it makes doing the PSK and the RIDI a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. PSK, there's still some traction for PSK.
It still exists.
It hasn't been completely wiped out by FT whatever, although the JS8 call people are doing their best to take it out completely.
Well, PSK has now joined the ranks of CW.
Yeah.
They said the same thing about CW, but then CW kind of made a comeback. So I think PSK, I'm not saying I'll never do FT8 or JS8 call, but I like free running teletype modes because you can have you don't have to use macros. You can just type back and forth like IRC to each other.
Yeah. For
Well,
sure.
great. Let's see. Let's kind of wrap her up. Any last questions for Matt? Otherwise, we'll let him go and continue on. All right, hearing nothing. Matt, thanks for your time.
you, Matt.
Great subject. Like I said, we'll post the presentation.
Happy to do it.
And
And I
Thanks,
got all
Matt.
your call signs here, so I'll look for them on the spotting page later.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a good one.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
So Jim, what do you think? 5-minute break, come back at 11:06.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.